my dears. Granny has missed you so much. And Ginger the cat has too. Now tell me, are your teeth brushed? Your pajamas on? Now listen closely. Open your ears and your imagination, because Granny is about to begin tonight's bedtime tale just for you.
Once upon a time, a little girl named Jasmine lived with her stepmother and her daughter. Jasmine's father was a merchant, and he travelled a lot. The stepmother loved and cared only for her own daughter, while all the leftovers and house chores were left for Jasmine. One night, the stepmother decided to get rid of Jasmine and leave her alone in the forest. As the night grew darker, Jasmine became very scared. Suddenly, she saw a small wooden house in the darkness, and she decided to go closer to see if someone was there to help her. The door was open, so she entered and found the house in a big mess. Jasmine thought that whoever lived there might not have time to clean, so she started tidying the house to pay for her stay. When she finished cleaning, she decided to cook some porridge to eat and leave for the house owner when he returned. After she ate, she felt tired and slowly went to sleep in a quiet corner of the house. A few moments later, a bear entered the house. He was shocked to see the house clean, and he ate the tasty porridge, wondering who had done this. Then he went to his bed to sleep and was surprised by a little girl sleeping in his bed. He decided to let her sleep, and he lay down on the floor beside the bed and quietly fell asleep. When Jasmine woke up in the morning and saw the bear near her, she screamed in fear. Her scream woke the bear, and he gently asked her not to be scared. The bear thanked her for the cleaning and the porridge and gifted her a beautiful dress. She was very happy and explained how poor they were and how her stepmother had left her in the forest. The bear felt pity for her, gifted her a horse with bags full of gold, and asked the horse to take her home. Jasmine thanked the bear and started her way home. When Jasmine arrived home, she found her father waiting for her in tears, while her stepmother's eyes were fixed only on the horse. Jasmine told her father everything her stepmother had done to her while he was away. The father could not believe his ears, while the stepmother tried to interrupt and accuse Jasmine with lies. The father ordered the stepmother to stop talking and leave his house. They picked up their bags and left in silence, knowing he would never forgive them for what they had done to Jasmine. The stepmother took her daughter to the forest and told her not to worry, because she had an idea about how to get gold. She took her daughter to the bear's house and told her to ask the bear to give her gold, just like he had given Jasmine. She sat among the trees, dreaming of the gold her daughter would bring. When the daughter entered the house, she felt angry and disappointed when she saw no gold inside. She tasted the porridge, disliked it, and angrily threw it onto the floor, turning the quiet house into a mess. Then she climbed onto the bear's bed and fell asleep there without care. When the bear came back and found his house in a mess and his porridge on the floor, he became very angry. He wondered who could be the person brave enough to do this to his house. When he entered the room and saw the girl sleeping in his bed, he screamed with anger. The girl woke up and angrily asked the bear why he was roaring and disturbing her sleep. The bear asked her to leave his house, but she replied that she would not leave until he gave her gold, just as he had given to Jasmine. The bear, filled with anger, agreed and gave her a horse loaded with bags of gold, and without a word of thanks, the girl took the horse and walked away. When her mother saw her coming with the horse of gold, she was flying with joy and immediately started checking the bags of gold. And suddenly the horse turned into a donkey and the gold turned into rubbish. And then they realized that the bear had tricked them to teach them a lesson. Jasmine and her father used the gold to live happily together, and her father now had enough money and promised he would never leave her alone again, while the stepmother and her daughter ended up as beggars, wandering from village to village, regretting their cruelty. In a beautiful kingdom lived 3 friends. They were very close, and they always sat together in the garden, sharing tea and gentle conversations. One day, as they sat in the garden, one of them smiled and said, "I dream of marrying the king's chef, so I may taste every kind of food in the palace and never worry about cooking again." The second friend laughed and said, "As for me, I wish to marry the king's tailor, so I will wear the most beautiful dresses in the kingdom." Then they turned to the third friend and asked gently, "And you, who do you wish to marry?" She lowered her eyes and said gently, "I wish to marry the king himself, not for the crown or the throne, but because one day I saw him, my heart chose him, and I only wish to be by his side." They began to laugh, teasing her and making fun of her dream. What they did not know was that the king was in the city that day, dressed like a simple man, and by coincidence he heard the conversation of the 3 friends. The next day, the 3 girls received an invitation from the king, and they felt worried, wondering why. And they went to the castle immediately, bowing with respect before the king. The king asked the first girl, "I heard you wish to marry my chef." The girl asked for forgiveness and said it was only girls' talk. The king replied, "Do not be shy. Here is my chef, and he will be honored to marry you." The chef held the girl's hand, smiled at her, and said, "Will you marry me?" And the girl felt so happy she wanted to jump with joy. The king asked the second girl, "And you? I heard you wished to marry my tailor." She bowed and said, "Yes, your highness." Then the king smiled and replied, "Here is my tailor, and he will be honored to have you as his wife." The tailor held her hand and asked her to marry him. She looked at him and almost fainted with joy. The 2 friends looked at their handsome grooms and could not believe if they were dreaming or if this was real. Then the king called the third girl and said, "And you, can you tell me again your wish?" She fell to her knees, asking for forgiveness, saying she had been foolish and begging him to pardon her. Her 2 friends, instead of feeling pity, laughed at her without mercy. Then the king stood up, held her hands gently, and helped her stand. Then he bent down before her and asked, "Will you accept to marry me?" And everyone stood frozen in shock. In that moment, the two friends were filled with jealousy, and their joy disappeared, for she would marry the king while they would marry servants. The king and his bride celebrated a beautiful wedding and began a happy life together. But her friends could not feel happy, as jealousy filled their hearts. Each day, the king fell more and more in love with his new queen. Not only the king, but all the people in the kingdom loved her for her humble heart and kindness. A few months passed, and the queen became pregnant, and the king was filled with joy. And few months later, she gave birth to beautiful twin baby boys. The king's heart was full of joy as he held his babies, thanking God for this precious gift. But the queen's two friends became more jealous each day, and their hate grew day by day. Soon after, the king was called to war to lead his army, leaving behind for the first time his faithful wife and their newborn babies. The queen loved her children deeply and only left them at night when they were asleep. And with the king away and the babies sleeping alone, the two friends prepared an evil plan. They came in the night while everyone slept, stole the babies, and quietly slipped out of the castle. Deep in the forest, they placed the babies in a small boat, hoping they would never be seen again. They pushed the small boat into the river and left without looking back. By coincidence, two angels were passing nearby, and when they saw the two babies, their hearts filled with pity, so they decided to save them and take them to the Queen of the Glass Mountain. The Glass Queen was very beautiful and was protected by a lion, a dragon, and a magical bird. And when the angels gave her the babies, she agreed to keep them under her protection. When the queen woke the next day and found her babies gone, she cried day and night until she fell sick and refused both food and drink. The news reached the king, and he rushed back to his castle. When he saw his wife's state, he could not hold back his tears, and he promised that he would bring their children back. He entered his children's room and sat beside their empty beds, crying and wondering what to do. Then he called his ministers and the wise man of the castle. The wise man told the king that the only solution was to ask the magic owl, for the magic owl spoke only the truth. He brought the owl and gently took it out of its cage, and everyone looked at it in surprise. The owl asked the king to speak his question. With a shaking voice, the king said, "What happened to my children?" The owl replied, "They are under the protection of the Glass Queen." The king then asked, "How did they reach her?" The owl answered, "Two angels saved them from the river." The king asked again, "How did they reach the river?" The owl replied, "The queen's two friends stole them and placed them in a boat." At that moment, anger filled the king's heart, and he shouted an order to bring the two friends before him. The soldiers brought the two friends before the king, and they threw themselves at his feet, begging for forgiveness. The king looked at them with anger and said, "Why did you do this? She was your friend. I made your wishes come true. You live in my palace, a life you once only dreamed of." They began to cry and confessed it was jealousy. The king shouted to the soldiers and ordered them to be taken to jail. The king mounted his horse, chose 2 loyal soldiers, and without delay began his long journey toward the distant glass mountain. When they reached the glass mountain, they saw an old man sitting at the foot of the stairs. The king approached him, and the old man immediately asked for water. Without thinking twice, the king gave him water, and after the old man drank, he asked the king why he was there. The king explained that he had come to find his lost children. The old man said, "You are kind, and you are here not for treasure. I will help you," he warned him. "First, you will meet a lion. If you try to pass while he sleeps, you will turn to stone, so wait until he wakes and walks away. Then you will meet a dragon who will ask you what is the most precious thing in life. Answer time, and he will let you pass. After that, you will meet a magical bird who will offer you a feather and promise great power, but do not touch him, or you will turn into smoke. Thank him and continue. At the top, you will meet the Glass Queen. She will ask you to marry her. Be careful, for her beauty makes men forget who they are." The king thanked the old man and climbed the stairs. He waited for the lion to wake and pass. "Time," answered the dragon's question with "Time." The dragon listened to his answer, nodded with respect, and let him pass, and ignored the magical bird's offer. At last, after climbing the long, shining stairs, he reached the palace of the Glass Queen. Her beauty was so great that it almost took his breath away, but when she asked him to marry her, he remembered his wife and his children. He refused, told her his story, and began to cry. Seeing his true heart, the Glass Queen believed him and called for the angels to bring the boys. When the king saw his children, he could not believe his eyes. He hugged them tightly, thanked the Glass Queen, and returned to his castle with his sons. He entered the room of his wife, and when she saw her children, life returned to her, and her heart leaped with happiness. She hugged them gently, crying and thanking the king, and from that day on, they lived happily ever after. Once upon a time, an old man and an old woman lived in a small wooden house beside a quiet forest. One day, the old man asked, "Grandmother, please bake something for us." The old woman replied, "There is no flour left." But she swept the floor, cleaned the corners, and searched the cupboard. At the bottom, she found a little flour. She mixed it with water, shaped a small round bun, and baked it in the oven. When it was ready, the bun was golden, warm, and round. The old woman smiled and said, "You are bright like the sun. I will call you Kolobok." She placed Kolobok on the window to cool. A gentle breeze touched him, and suddenly Kolobok jumped down, rolled off the window, and went away along the path. Kolobok rolled into the forest and met a squirrel. The squirrel sniffed the air and said, "You smell warm and sweet. I will eat you," Kolobok said. "Do not eat me. Listen to my poem. I was backed by a grandmother. I cooled on a window bright. I rolled away from my little home. I rolled far and free. And from you, little squirrel, I will roll away too. Kolobok rolled away quickly. Soon he met a wolf. The wolf sniffed the air and said, "You smell delicious. I am hungry. I will eat you." But Kolobok said, "Listen to my poem first. I was baked by a grandmother. I cooled on a window bright. I rolled away from my little home. I rolled away from the squirrel. And from you, hungry wolf, I will roll away too." Kolobok rolled away again. Then Kolobok met a big bear sitting by the forest path. The bear laughed and said, "You smell like fresh bread. I will eat you in one bite." Kolobok said bravely, "Wait and listen to my poem. I was baked by a grandmother. I cooled on a window bright. I rolled away from my little home. I rolled away from the squirrel. I rolled away from the wolf. And from you, big bear, I will roll away too." Kolobok rolled faster than ever. At last, Kolobok met a fox near her little house. The fox smiled gently and said, "I heard you have a very nice poem. My ears do not hear very well. Can you sit on my nose and say it?" Kolobok trusted the fox. Feeling proud, he climbed onto her nose and began his poem. The fox opened her mouth, and Kolobok rolled inside. And that is how Kolobok's journey ended. Dear little kids, remember this lesson. Do not trust strangers, even if they sound kind and friendly. Once upon a time, a young man named John lived alone in a beautiful, cozy wooden house in a quiet village. He was kind-hearted and gentle, and his greatest joy was planting red flowers. He cared for them with love, watching them grow day by day. John dreamed of the moment he would meet the love of his life, the day he could place a red flower in her hands and offer her his heart along with it. One day, a soldier interrupted his thoughts, handed him an order to join the army, and pulled him into the war before he could even say goodbye to his red flowers. When the battle began, he could not bear the scenes of violence around him. The noise, the fear, and the suffering overwhelmed his heart, and unable to endure it, he turned and ran away from the battlefield. When he reached his village, the villagers grew angry, calling him a coward and driving him away. He ran as fast as he could, the villagers chasing him until he found himself deep in the forest. There he fell to the ground and began to cry. Lifting his face to the sky, he prayed, asking God to take his kindness away, for he no longer wanted to be a coward. Suddenly, a wizard appeared before him and said, "What you ask for will turn you into a beast." John agreed without hesitation. "A beast is better than a coward," he said. He believed his kindness had only made him weak and wanted revenge on the world that rejected him. The wizard warned him, "I can take your kindness now, but I cannot stop it from returning." Then he placed his wand against John's heart, drew out his kindness, and transformed him into a beast. John examined his new body, feeling power surge through him and strange, greedy emotions awaken inside his heart. Drunk on this new strength, he immediately returned to the village, roaring with rage. "Kind people are cowards," he shouted. "Now I am strong. You will bring me gold and grain every week. If you refuse, I will burn your village and every village around it to the ground." Then the villagers, terrified, began giving him gold. Every week he returned, demanding and collecting gold, grain, vegetables, and meat. After a few months, he built a great castle for himself, surrounded by a huge garden. He had a room filled with gold and treasure, yet he was not happy. Seeing red flowers brought him more joy than all the gold in the world. One day, a beautiful girl passed by the beast's castle. She stopped to admire the flowers, and unable to resist their beauty, she stepped into his garden. Then the beast appeared before her. She remained calm as he asked why she was in his garden. She replied softly that she had been drawn there by the red flowers, which had impressed her deeply. Gently, he cut one flower and handed it to her. She thanked him and left, filling his heart with confusion and unfamiliar feelings. The beast then entered his treasure room and sat among piles of gold, feeling lonely and deeply sad. The next day, the girl returned to the beast, bringing him a warm, tasty pie. He accepted it and gently invited her to sit with him and share the pie together. The day after, she came back again, this time carrying a book, and offered to read to him. On the terrace, she read to him, and he soon fell asleep with his head resting on her knees. Spending every day together, playing in the garden, reading, and dancing among the flowers. One day, while they were dancing, she asked him why he always kept one room closed. Then he gently took her by the hand and led her into the room she had asked about. And he said, "You may have anything you wish from this room." She looked at him angrily and asked why he needed all this gold, telling him that people in the villages were dying from hunger. He replied coldly that they deserved it. Her anger grew, and she begged him to return the gold to save them from famine, but he refused, unable to forget how they had treated him. Heartbroken, she told him she never wanted to see him again and left, leaving the beast alone in his loneliness once more. The next day, the beast sat in his garden waiting for her, but she did not come. He waited for days until snow began to fall. Still, he remained there, waiting until he collapsed to the ground, covered in snow. At last, the girl returned and found him lying there, cold and weak beneath the snow. She called his name, trying to wake him, and with great effort helped him back to his bed. For many nights she stayed by his side, caring for him, feeding him, and keeping the fire burning until his strength slowly returned. When the beast finally awoke, he found her asleep by his legs, exhausted from watching over him. His heart filled with warmth and gratitude, he gently woke her, and they embraced tightly. With a soft voice and honest tears, he promised her that he would be kind again, no matter the cost. Together, they rode a chariot filled with gold to the villagers, distributing it to the people. The villagers rejoiced and cheered with happiness. When it was over, John and the kind girl sat in the forest, and he spoke of how different his heart felt, how light and joyful it had become. Before he could finish, he transformed back into a human, for kindness had returned fully to his heart. John understood then that kindness was not weakness, but true strength. He proposed to the kind girl, and they were married in a simple, beautiful wedding among the villagers. From that day on, John was never alone again, and he finally had someone to whom he could give a red flower every single day. Once upon a time, a kind man and his wife lived in a beautiful, cozy house deep in the forest. They loved each other, but they were a little sad because they never had children. But they were always content and happy to have each other. One day, while they were enjoying the beautiful weather, they saw a small snake coming toward them. The wife said, "Look at this beautiful little snake. I wonder where his parents are." The little snake looked at them and replied, "I heard you don't have children. I would be honored if you took me as a son." The wife took the little snake in her hand and said, "We will treat you as if you were our real son." From that day, the little snake became a big part of the old man's and his wife's lives. The little snake grew and became a big snake, and he was happy with his new parents. One day, the snake approached his father and said, "Father, I am a grown man now, and I want to get married." The father asked, "Do you have a bride in mind you want to propose to?" The snake replied, "I want the daughter of the king to be my bride." The father found his son's request strange, but he agreed to visit the king and ask for his daughter's hand for his son, the snake. The old man visited the king and showed him respect, asking for his daughter's hand for his son. When the king asked the old man to tell him more about his son, the old man explained that his son was a snake he had adopted. The king laughed so hard, thinking it was a joke, but the old man assured him that he was serious. Then the king said, "I will accept if you turn my garden into a golden garden." Thinking this would be impossible, the old man went back and informed his son, the snake, about the king's wish. The snake gave him a seed and asked him to plant it in the king's garden. Without question, the old man went and planted the seed as his son had requested, hoping it would turn the garden golden and his son could marry the daughter of the king. Once he finished and raised his head, the garden became all gold. When the king came down, he was impressed by his golden garden. He explained to the old man that he had not expected him to really turn his garden into gold. Then he said, "Turn my castle into a golden castle, and I will accept the snake marrying my daughter." The old man returned home and informed the snake of the king's new wish. The snake gave him a broom and asked him to sweep the castle floor with it. The old man did exactly what his son had asked him and swept the castle floor with the broom he had given him. The castle turned into gold in the blink of an eye, and the king was shocked. Then the king called his wife and daughter and told them the story of the snake. The daughter obeyed her father as he had made a promise, and she agreed to marry the snake. The king then summoned the old man to the palace and told him that his daughter had agreed to the marriage. The old man returned home with great joy and informed the snake that the princess had accepted the marriage. And soon after, the snake and his father arrived at the castle in a chariot pulled by 3 great elephants. When the snake arrived and entered the castle, the king and his wife were very scared, but the princess remained calm. When the snake met the princess, she greeted him with respect and kindness, bowing gently before him, while the snake looked at her with gratitude and admiration, surprised by her courage and gentle heart. He asked if she was afraid, but she gently touched him and said she was not, because she felt he had a kind heart. With her gentle touch, in a magical moment, a handsome prince emerged from the snake's skin. Everyone stared in shock, unable to believe their eyes, as the prince calmly explained that a wicked witch had trapped him in a snake's body. He held the princess's hand and continued that only true kindness from a princess could break the spell. The princess felt her heart overflow with joy and wonder as she looked at the handsome prince standing before her. Then the queen took the snake's skin and burned it in the fire, saying, "Now you will never turn into a snake again." The prince tried to stop her, saying, "Oh no, you don't know what you just did." But it was too late, and the prince turned into a white dove, leaving everyone in shock. He flew quickly, hit the window glass, hurt himself, began to bleed, and then flew away, leaving the princess in deep sadness, crying without stopping. The princess could not bear the pain in her heart and informed her parents that she would go to find her prince. She went deep into the forest, crying and searching everywhere for him. And then she met a kind fox who saw her crying and offered to help her. She told the fox her story, and the fox told her that he had heard her story sung by the magic birds. The fox took her to the magic birds, and she learned from them that the prince had turned human again, and that he was in his castle, badly injured and close to dying. The fox told her not to worry, because she could save him by placing 3 magic feathers on his wounds, and that if she waited until night, when the birds slept, he could get them for her. And at night, the fox climbed the branches and slowly and gently took a feather from each bird, and he gave them to the princess so she could save her prince. The princess hugged the fox warmly and thanked him with all her heart for his help. She said goodbye to him and walked bravely toward the prince's castle. The prince lay pale and unconscious, while his parents stood beside him, crying in despair. The princess entered his room and looked at him sadly, then looked at the feathers, hoping they would help. When she placed the feathers on his wounds, the prince immediately opened his eyes. He stood up and hugged her and said, "I dreamed that you would come to save me." Soon after, they celebrated a beautiful wedding in the castle, surrounded by joy and light, and from that day on, the prince and the princess lived happily ever after. Once upon a time, in a beautiful kingdom, there lived a princess named Judia. Judia lived in a grand castle with her uncle, the king, and his wife, the queen. They had 2 daughters, Lenka and Dina, who were the same age as Judia. Judia was extraordinarily beautiful and unique. Her eyes were big and blue like the sky. Her hair was long and black like the night, but her greatest beauty was her heart. She was kind, humble, and loved helping people. Lenka and Dina were proud and jealous. The queen and the king were greedy and arrogant. They did not like Judia, because everyone in the kingdom loved her. So they treated her badly, but Judia never complained. While Lenka and Dina lived in luxurious rooms, Judia lived in a small, cold room on the servants' side of the castle. Yet she did not feel lonely, because since the day she was born, a fairy had protected her. The fairy warmed her room and taught her music. She taught her dancing, so her steps became light and graceful. She taught her reading and science to understand the world, and poetry to touch hearts. The king and queen feared Judia's beauty and popularity, but feared the fairy even more. Lenka and Dina bullied Judia every day, but Judia remained patient and gentle. When Judia turned 17, sadness filled her heart. She knew that when she turned 18, the fairy would have to leave her, but the fairy hugged her and said softly, "Do not worry, my dear. Before your 18th birthday, I will arrange everything for you." Soon after, the king announced a grand royal party. Kings and princes from many kingdoms were invited. The king wanted to find husbands for Lenka and Dina. Judia felt excited. It would be her first royal party. But her joy faded when she remembered she had no dress or jewels. But the fairy whispered, "Do not worry." On the morning of the party, Judia received a box from her uncle, the king. For a moment, her heart filled with hope. When she opened it, she found an ugly dress made from plastic bags and jewelry made from leaves and chickpeas. Tears filled her eyes, and the fairy said gently, "Do not cry, wear them." Judia obeyed. When she looked in the mirror, she could not believe her eyes. The ugly dress had turned into a magnificent gown, shining like stars. The strange jewelry had become sparkling diamonds. She looked unbelievably beautiful. She thanked her fairy and walked toward the grand hall of the castle. The moment Judia entered the hall, everyone turned to look at her. Silence fell across the room. She walked gracefully to the king and queen and bowed respectfully. They were shocked. They expected to mock her, but she arrived shining like the moon. Furious, the king said, "You rejected my gift." The fairy appeared beside Judia. "Are you sure?" she asked. The king froze. "Forgive me," he said softly. Among the guests was a young king, brave and handsome, famous for his wisdom. While Lenka and Dina tried to attract his attention, his eyes were only on Judia. He walked past them politely and went straight to Judia, and jealousy filled Lenka and Dina's hearts. To get attention, Dina and Lenka started singing, and they sang beautifully. Then the queen told her daughters to ask Judia to sing, hoping to embarrass her, believing she had learned nothing. The daughters pulled Judia closer. "Judia, please, it's your turn to sing for us." Judia felt shy, but the charming king smiled and said, "Please, Judia, I would love to hear your voice." Judia began to sing. Her voice was like a nightingale. The hall was enchanted. The king, queen, and their daughters grew furious. They asked Judia to recite poetry, hoping she would fail. But Judia recited beautiful poems, one after another. Soon everyone was talking only about Judia's beauty and intelligence. Finally, the charming king invited her to dance. Lenka and Dina laughed secretly, sure she did not know how to dance. But Judia danced like a graceful swan. That night, the charming king asked for Judia's hand in marriage, and Judia said yes. The king and queen were furious. The party was meant for their daughters, not Judia. The next day, they invited Judia on a royal horse ride, hoping to harm her. The fairy whispered, "Ride only the horse that the charming king chooses for you." The servants brought a wild horse for Judia, but the charming king stopped them. "This horse is dangerous. Bring another one." They brought a gentle white horse. Again, the plan failed. The next day, they planned a grand chariot race and decided to give Judia a weak horse so she would crash. But the fairy whispered secretly to the charming king to choose the golden chariot, and the charming king did exactly as the fairy had asked him. When the race began, the king's soldiers moved against Judia, and the charming king tried to force her to crash. Suddenly, the golden horse opened magnificent wings and flew into the sky. It carried Judia and the charming king far away. The people of his kingdom welcomed them with joy. Back in the old castle, the king, queen, Lenka, and Dina felt ashamed. They understood that kindness always wins in the end. They went to Judia and asked for forgiveness. Judia forgave them with a gentle smile, and from that day on, she ruled with wisdom, kindness, and love, and they lived happily ever after. Once upon a time, near the wide blue sea, lived a poor fisherman with his wife. They lived in a small wooden cabin close to the shore. The fisherman was poor, but his heart was full of joy. He loved his wife deeply and worked every day to take care of her. He fished from morning till sunset and came home tired but smiling. But his wife was never happy. She complained about the cabin. She complained about the food. She criticized everything her husband did, no matter how hard he tried. One day, as the fisherman was fishing, he felt something very heavy pulling his fishing rod. It was hard to lift. He pulled with all his strength. At last, out of the water came a big golden fish, shining brightly in the sunlight. The fisherman was shocked and amazed. Suddenly, the golden fish spoke. "Please, kind fisherman," said the fish softly, "do not kill me. I am the daughter of the king of the sea. If you set me free, I can make any wish of yours come true." The fisherman was surprised, but his heart was kind. "Oh, no," he said, "I could never harm you. I have no wish. You are free." He gently released the golden fish back into the sea. The golden fish smiled and said, "Thank you, good fisherman. If you ever need anything, come to the shore and say, golden fish, I have a wish, tick-tock, tick-tock, I will come." The fisherman rubbed his eyes, hardly believing what had happened, and went home to tell his wife. When his wife heard the story, she was first surprised, then very angry. "You fool," she shouted. "Why didn't you ask for anything? Go back and wish for a beautiful house." The fisherman didn't want to, but he loved his wife. So he went back to the sea and called the golden fish. The golden fish appeared again. The fisherman said politely, "My wife wishes for a beautiful house." The golden fish nodded. "Go home, good fisherman. Your wife has what she asked for." When the fisherman returned, he was amazed. The small cabin was gone. In its place stood a beautiful house. He hugged his wife, and she was happy, but only for 3 days. "This house is too small," she said. "I want a big mansion." Once more, the fisherman went to the sea and asked the golden fish, and once more the wish came true. A grand mansion stood where the house had been. He hugged his wife, and she was happy, but only for few days. After a few days, she demanded more. "I want a castle," she said. The fisherman went back. The golden fish granted the wish. When he returned home, a beautiful castle stood there instead of the mansion. He hugged his wife, and she was happy. Then, after a few weeks, the wife was unhappy again. "What do you want now?" the fisherman asked sadly. She answered, "I want a castle in the clouds. I want to look down at the earth. I want the most beautiful home in the whole universe." With a heavy heart, the fisherman went to the sea and asked the golden fish. The wish was granted, but when the fisherman returned, there was no house, no castle, no wife. The fisherman sat by the sea and cried. Then he went back to the golden fish and said, "Please, return my wife. This is my wish, not hers, and it will be my last." The golden fish was angry, but it saw the fisherman's pure heart. "Go home," said the fish. "Your wish is granted." When the fisherman returned, he saw his old wooden cabin again, and there, outside the cabin, stood his wife. She ran to him and hugged him tightly. "I am sorry," she cried. "I understand now. Happiness is not in houses or castles. Happiness is being with you." From that day on, they lived together peacefully, happy and grateful, in their cozy little cabin by the sea. Long ago, there lived a king who loved gold more than anything else in the world. His palace was filled with shining coins, golden cups, and sparkling jewels, yet his heart was never satisfied. No matter how much gold he owned, he always wanted more, believing it would bring him happiness and power. One quiet night, under the light of the moon, the king walked alone into the forest. Hidden among the ancient trees was a magical well that could grant wishes. Without thinking of the consequences, the king leaned over the glowing water and wished that his hands would turn everything he touched into gold. The well shimmered, and the wish was granted. The next morning, the king woke up in amazement. His blanket, pillow, and bed had all turned into gold. Laughing with joy, he tested his magic by touching his hairbrush and towel, watching them instantly become golden. Proud and excited, the king believed his dream had finally come true. Soon, hunger crept in. When the king reached for his cup of coffee, it turned into gold. The bread and eggs became gold as well, cold and impossible to eat. Worried, the king called a soldier to help feed him. As the soldier stepped closer, the king accidentally touched him. and the soldier turned into a golden statue. The king's daughter rushed into the room. She wanted to help her father and gently held his hands. In that instant, she too turned into gold. The king fell to his knees, crying in regret. Surrounded by gold, he realized he had lost what mattered most, and that his love for gold had brought him only pain. As the king wept, a fairy appeared and asked if gold had made him happy. With tears in his eyes, the king apologized and begged for forgiveness. The fairy waved her magic, and everything returned to normal. The king's daughter and the soldier came back to life, and the golden spell was broken. From that day on, the king never wished for gold again. He ruled with wisdom and kindness. Deep in a quiet forest, a kind mother and her daughter Elana lived in a small wooden house, and every day they sat under the tall trees sewing clothes with needles and colorful threads. One night they heard a loud knock on the door. They felt scared, frightened but brave. They opened it to find a huge bear standing there, tired. The bear was weak and sick, asking gently for help, so they welcomed him inside, gave him warm soup and a soft bed, and cared for him until he became strong again, and soon they became close friends. But one evening the bear looked serious. "I must leave," he said sadly. "I need to save myself." The mother and Elana did not understand what he meant, but they felt very sad, so they hugged him tightly, and with heavy hearts, they watched him walk away into the forest, leaving them behind. One bright afternoon, the mother and Elana were sewing in the forest. Suddenly, they heard a voice. "Help me! Help me!" They ran toward the sound. There, they found a dwarf with a very long white beard, stuck in tree branches. They tried to pull him, but the beard would not move. "We must cut it," said the mother softly. With scissors, they carefully cut part of the beard and freed him. But instead of thanking them, the dwarf shouted angrily. His beard was now short, only reaching his knees. He turned away without a word and disappeared into the forest. Another day, while they were sewing in the forest again, they heard the same voice. "Help me! Please help me!" They ran and found the dwarf near the lake. A big fish had caught his beard and was pulling him toward the water. They tried to pull him back, but the fish would not let go. Again, they used their scissors and cut his beard to save him. Now his beard reached only his chest, but the dwarf was even angrier than before. "You ruined my beard!" he shouted rudely. Without saying thank you, he walked away. The mother and Elana were confused, but they still felt pity for him. One day again, as the mother and Elana were sewing in the forest, they heard a familiar voice. "Help me!" They ran quickly and found the same dwarf, this time stuck in a thorny bush. They tried to free him, but there was only one way. Slowly, carefully, they cut the rest of his beard. Now the dwarf had no beard at all. He became furious. "You foolish humans!" he shouted. He screamed cruel words at the kind mother and her daughter, when suddenly the bear appeared from the forest and the dwarf froze in fear. "Please, Prince, forgive me. I'm sorry." And immediately the bear gave the dwarf a powerful blow, sending him far into the sky. And then the mother and Alana ran to hug the bear with joy, and in that moment a bright light surrounded him, and he transformed into a charming prince. And the mother and Alana stepped back in shock, while the prince gently explained that the dwarf was a bad wizard who had turned him into a bear, and that all his magic lived in his white beard. And because they had cut it, his spell was broken. So the prince asked Ilana to marry him, and they celebrated a beautiful wedding in a grand castle and lived happily ever after. In a grand kingdom surrounded by many lands, there lived a wise king and his beloved son, the prince. The king wished to find a bride for his son, so he invited princesses from neighboring kingdoms. One by one, they arrived in glittering carriages, wearing crowns, jewels, and dresses made of silk and gold. But every time the prince met a princess, his heart felt strangely heavy. They spoke only of castles, crowns, riches, and power. "These princesses are beautiful," he told his father, "but their hearts are not. They dream of crowns, not kindness." So the prince made a brave decision. "I want to travel through our kingdom," he said. "I want to find a girl who is kind, humble, and wise. Not a queen of gold, but a queen of heart." The king agreed, and the prince left the palace wearing simple old clothes, so no one would know who he truly was. Far from the palace, in a small quiet village near the forest, there were two houses standing side by side. In the first house lived a poor woodcutter, his wife, and their daughter. The father worked every day in the forest, cutting wood to earn a little money. Their life was simple, but their home was full of warmth and love. Their daughter was gentle and hard-working, read books on her free time, and carried food to her father in the forest. Even though she had little, her heart was rich. In the second house lived a wealthy merchant, his wife, and their daughter. But their daughter was lazy and proud. She spent her days eating sweets and laughing at others. Whenever she saw the poor girl, she mocked her. "You are poor," she said. "Look at your old clothes. Look at my dresses. I will marry a rich man and you will marry a beggar." One evening, the prince arrived at the village, tired and hungry. He first knocked on the door of the rich house. The merchant's daughter opened the door, looked at his old clothes, and wrinkled her nose. "Go away," she said. "We don't help poor people here. Don't come near our house again." The prince walked away quietly, his heart saddened. Then he knocked on the door of the poor house. The kind girl opened the door and looked at him gently. "I'll bring you some food, but I can't let you inside until my father returns," she said. She brought him food, and the undercover prince was impressed by her kindness. He felt he had found his future queen, but he decided to stay undercover to know her better. When the woodcutter returned, he welcomed the stranger warmly. "Anyone who knocks on our door is a guest," he said. They welcomed him into their home and gave him a cozy room and a bed, surrounded by warmth and love. To repay their kindness, the prince began working with the woodcutter in the forest. The prince stayed with them for several days. He saw how kind the girl was, how she respected her parents. He saw how the rich girl was bullying the poor girl, while the kind girl ignored her insults. The undercover prince could no longer stand it. He stepped forward to protect her. The mean girl started mocking him too. She laughed and said, "You suit each other perfectly. You are both poor, so you can make even more poor people together." The undercover prince realized that it was time to reveal his true identity. He wrote to the king, telling him that he had found his bride, and he sent him the address. The next day, the undercover prince knelt before the kind daughter and asked her to be his wife. She said yes, and her parents were filled with happiness. They had a simple wedding in the village, but the mean girl and her mother mocked her, saying, "Look at you, marrying this poor man in such a cheap wedding." The prince was fed up, so he replied, "You are very unkind. Soon you will understand your mistake." Before he could finish his sentence, the king arrived with his soldiers. All the villagers were shocked. The king stepped down from his horse, ran to his son, and hugged him tightly. "My son, I missed you so much," he said. The mean mother and her daughter stared in disbelief. "What son?" they whispered. "Is he a prince?" Everyone was in shock. The prince lifted his bride onto his horse and rode away, leaving everyone behind in great shock. The mean mother and her daughter drowned in tears, realizing that they had lost their chance to become a royal family because of their arrogance. The woodcutter and his wife were invited to join their daughter, the future queen, in the beautiful castle, and they lived happily ever after.
Granny Fofa finished her story tonight. Stars are shining soft and bright. Close your eyes, it's time to sleep. Magic dreams are yours to keep. I am safe, I am loved, I am gentle like a dove. I am happy, I am strong. Sweet dreams follow me all night long. Sleep, my little heart, sleep tight. See you in dreams till morning light.
Nighty, nighty, sweethearts.